Hey, everybody, and welcome to a conversation with Rob from Your Most Interesting Story podcast. Hey, Rob, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. How are you, Bob?
I'm good. We were just talking about spying just a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
People spying on me.
Yep.
Although I could just be paranoid.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably safe to be a little paranoid. These days, you never know. You never know.
These days, I think you should be a lot paranoid. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But I met Rob on his show, and I told a story, and you'll have to go over there to listen to it.
Yes, definitely.
And you could go to the YouTube right there, YouTube at YMIS Podcast, if you'd like to.
Yeah, and just to set expectation, depending on when this goes out, that's your story, which is very interesting, by the way. It's not going to be up.
I appreciate that.
It's as the podcast claims, it's not going to be up until the end of October-ish.
Okay,
probably,
yeah. So there you go. So yeah, end of October, but this will probably be out before that, to be honest with you. But that's okay.
Yeah,
people see these things into the future. We're all just recording our futures here.
Exactly, and mine just takes a little bit longer to come.
Yeah, you got more processing time on yours. That's all.
It's in the Your Most Interesting Story oven at this point. It's cooking.
Exactly. There you go. You're baking it.
Exactly.
The interesting thing, I'm going to use interesting too much now. The interesting thing about our earlier conversation about the drones is we kind of agreed upon a topic, which a lot of times I don't agree upon. But I thought it was an interesting topic to me. Before we get to that, though, why did you start Your Most Interesting Story podcast?
So I've always had some sort of creative outlet that I do outside of my day job. And I had been sort of a very amateur songwriter, song producer for a very long time. And at some point I said, why? Yeah. It's all, thank you. Yeah. Well, you haven't heard my music, so maybe you may not say
it doesn't matter. I mean, music's one of those things where there's always an audience. It's kind of like art. No matter what you do, there is an audience. It may not be, I might not be the audience, but there's always an audience, right? And I wanted to tell you real quick, I have met so many people who do podcasts who are musicians, who don't do music podcasts, but do podcasts in general, who have some type of musical background. I find that fascinating.
From a production, one of the reasons why I made the jump to podcast is because I'd already spent a lot of time just in the song production with the multi-track and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And that's why I spent a lot of time on my episodes relative to some, because I kind of enjoy that aspect of sort of layering the things in and editing and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's similar in a lot of ways, but it's also, as you can imagine, very different.
Yeah.
But at some point I said, why one more song? And I didn't have a real good answer for that. And so I've been listening to podcasts for a very long time. And I've always kind of had an itch to see, well, what if I get something off the ground? And you met Jake briefly. Mm-hmm. He was there when you did your story. And he had actually just left a job where he and I had met. Right. And I knew that he was currently between what he wanted to do. And I just reached out to him and said, hey, do you have any interest in maybe giving this a whack? He's got some more free time on his hands, and I'd always had an itch to do it. And he said, sure, why not? So just started it up last December-ish, I believe, was the first episode that I got out. And and just have been having a blast kind of pulling it together. So it's just another creative outlet with, who knows? 10 years from now, it might still be around. I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to ever, I don't think I'm young enough to hit the duration of your podcasting, Bob, in terms of how
you're going to be dead by then? Is that what you're thinking?
I'll be dead. I might be dead by the time I hit 25
You never know.
That's true. Right,
There's more and more tools to make it easier. So, hey, you could be 90 years old putting stuff together still. Who knows?
That's true. I may have an aide that can do that. Maybe my nurse assisted living.
Yeah, Jake, what the hell's he doing? He's not even got a job.
That's true. He's about 15 years younger than me. He can come by.
keep him employed for a while. for free, of course.
Of course.
I'm going to put in a request. If you get really, really bored, I would love for you to take my story and turn it into an auto-tuned song. That would be fantastic.
Oh, okay.
That's
a challenge there. I'm actually off from my. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's all right. I'm off from my day job this week, so I'm kind of hunting around for things to do. And I actually thought, it's been a while since I tried to write something. And I'm usually, that's one of the reasons my songs aren't so good is they happen very quickly. I just sort of, knock them out and move on to the next one. Otherwise, I get bored. But yeah, maybe I'll take the content from your story that folks will have to tune in for.
I'm sure I said something that could be a chorus, and then you just kind of build around it, and auto tune me to make it. It doesn't have to be a long song.
Okay.
It doesn't even have to be a 3-minute song. It could just be like a 30-second demo.
I will take that as a creative challenge, and I'll keep you informed.
I just thought of that. I thought, well, wouldn't that be hilarious if you took your stories and then turned them into little mini songs, like with the meat of the story in them,
Yeah, I started in the first or second episode, I started actually creating kind of a custom music bed that was a bit of a different take on the Your Most Interesting Story theme. Mm-hmm. Which Jake actually wrote. He's a bit of a musician himself.
Oh, cool.
And so the first one takes place in Morocco, and so I kind of brought it into my software and gave this a bit of a Moroccan flair. And then I quickly realized that when I got into episode 2, they're like, okay, this is getting really tiring, just to put a musical sound bed beneath this. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop that.
It was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. Yeah.
That's the hard thing I think about some of these outlets is it can really escalate and become a lot of work, and you have to keep it in check so that it's fun enough to do but not so arduous to make you go nuts where you're like, I'm spending all my time doing this and I really need to play with the kids or something. So
100%.
You know what I mean?
I am literally constantly stripping things away. I get these ideas, I start playing with them, like, hey, that's kind of fun, and then I realize if I commit to doing this for every episode, I'm going to really regret this down the line. So you're exactly, it's like, what can I still keep to the quality level that I'm looking for, but at the same time not make each story a really arduous process, which takes a lot of the fun out of it.
And I think there's I mentioned, I said there are a lot of musicians. Well, I have a friend, an online friend who has been doing shows pre-podcasting as well since 2000, and he still does a podcast. It's called Overnightscape Underground. His name's Frank. But anyway, Frank has come up with this thing called a frivol, and as frivol is these ideas that come into your head that you think you want to do, but then you realize I shouldn't do that because it just is going to be too much of a time suck that I, don't really want to do all that work. I just want to have the idea of doing all that work. And so he calls them frivols. And so he's full of frivols. And then he tries to focus on the things that he really enjoys, as opposed to the barrage of ideas that come into his head all the time. So I think a lot of people are like that, though.
Yeah, we need a frivol cleanse once in a while.
Exactly. I love the word. I love it. It just sounds frivolous, right? It's a abbreviation of frivolous. Yeah. But it's an interesting concept, and I mean, I can't remember when he mentioned it. It's been a long time ago, but ever since then, I think about that. I think about how you people. I have so many irons in the fire. And the reality is you can have those irons, just don't stick them in the fire, and that's what a frivol is. A frivol is the iron that you can have on your workbench, but you just leave it there and don't actually start working on it. So
and maybe one day they'll come up with some software that can take that frivol and make it easy as pressing a button, right?
Be another inspiration or urge that forces you to join it at that point. But otherwise you just you get it out of your head and you set it aside. It's kind of like a song, a bug of a song, that gets stuck in your head, and so you have to sing the whole song several times to get it out of your head. So if you don't do that, you'll perseverate on it for weeks.
Right.
So
you need to get the earworm out, right?
Exactly, get the earworm out. No kidding. But well, that's cool. But yeah, your most interesting story, and there are a lot of them. So folks, go over there and you can listen to all kinds of different interesting stories that are happening over there.
And we're happy to field additional stories as well. So if anybody has a story that they want to relay,
they don't want to hear about you going to the grocery store. That's unless it involves a robbery or something.
An accident, perhaps an alien abduction. There's a lot of things that can happen.
Car comes through the front door. It has to have some, pow.
Right. The more
little bit of pow, a little bit interesting, odd things. So
exactly.
But so you are out on the West Coast, right? You're out in California, as they say. Do you guys say that, California? What do you say, Cali? What's the word that you use when you're
California?
You just say California? That sounds so pedestrian.
Yeah, we just say, and it sounds kind of formal, but yeah, definitely. And I learned very quickly when I relocated here, 25 years ago now, that it's never San Fran. It's either San Francisco or it's the city. If you call it San Fran, you instantly show that you're not from around here. So I had to clean that up. Yeah.
So you can't say Cisco because that.
No, you could theoretically.
The whole Cisco, tech company just shortened it down.
I mean, of course, I am in Silicon Valley, and I never thought of that. But yeah, I never realized that Cisco was short for San Francisco. But I'm sure you're
short for San Francisco. Yeah, but okay. Well, I'll have to keep that in mind. I don't think I ever call it San Fran. Funny thing, so I'm in St. Louis, and I just call it the city most of the time. I'm like, I got to go into the city. I don't call it St. Louis. I don't. Some people call it the loo. I don't even do that because the loo sounds like the bathroom to me. That's a British.
Yeah,
going to the loo, love. So yeah, St. Louis. I sound it all out. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but that's what I do. I just call it the city. It's the biggest city.
The big city.
Yeah, the city. Like, Christ, I got to go in the city today. That's what I usually say.
We've got a lot of cities around me. Like San Jose is actually, and I believe it's got more population now than San Francisco. It's definitely bigger, but the city is still San Francisco. So I have to say I'm going to San Jose. Actually, I live in San Jose. So I only say that, I guess, if I'm not currently in San Jose. So
no, you can't just say Jose. I'm in Jose.
You can't.
That sounds dirty.
Again. You could say Jose, but you instantly, again, brand yourself as someone who does not know what they're talking about, does not live here.
Oh, my goodness. So you said you moved out there how long ago?
In 97. So we're doing the math, like 27 years ago now? Yeah.
Yeah, 27 years now. Wow. And you moved there for love or for school or what?
I moved to escape my ex-wife and the harsh winters of Chicago.
Oh, okay. So it was for hate. Oh, that's fantastic.
Let's put it, an opportunity of freedom is how I like to position it.
Well, yeah.
Every January, once the holidays were over, and I'm sure you can relate as a Midwesterner, I would sort of look at the next 3 or 4 months ahead and wonder what's next. When's spring going to come? And I had a couple of family members who had already relocated, and then a good friend of mine was temporarily out in the Bay Area. So I said, well, if I'm going to go, I guess I'm going to go now.
Now's the time. I'm not attached anymore.
I'm not attached, and all my family had essentially left the Midwest as well. Yeah. So there was nothing to go back home to. So I ended up staying, despite the fact that it took me about 10 years to sort of get back to a standard of living that I was at in the Midwest. That's
right. Yeah. Because it's expensive out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Very expensive.
Yeah. Well, luckily in St. Louis, it's not like Chicago winters. I mean, there is a break about 3/4 of the way down from Chicago where the weather is not quite as bad. So thank goodness. I lived further north. I grew up in Decatur, which is further north, and it's still not good comparatively speaking. So I can see that.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's cool though. Now, you and I had discussed that we were going to talk about Bigfoot.
No.
Was that correct? Or am I thinking of the wrong thing?
Well, we did discuss Bigfoot when we talked, but we had decided we were going to talk about the Mothman.
Oh, the Mothman. I'm sorry.
The Mothman.
I had Bigfoot in my head. You know why? Because so whenever I do shows with my co-host Miles, we tell stories, and our last week's story was about Bigfoot. I had a Bigfoot story, but it wasn't about Bigfoot. It was about a movie about Bigfoot. But anyway.
Okay.
So Mothman, I'm sorry, Mothman.
That's all right. No, I know. I
don't have any notes here, Rob.
That's quite all right. Any cryptid will do, but
any cryptid, yeah. Now Mothman though is fascinating because I've actually been to Point Pleasant.
Have you?
Yes,
before or
I have
after
been to the Mothman statue. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Yeah. So I think that I don't know why I got Bigfoot stuck in my head with your name, but anyway.
Right.
But yeah, the Chicago actually now has ties to the Mothman as well. I don't know if you've been following that.
I have actually, and that's one of the reasons why this could be a cool topic, because I was actually born in West Virginia and lived there for 13 years. And when I was 2 years old is when the whole thing started, right? So in 66.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 66, 67 is when the whole thing started. And there are actually 2 sightings. I've been doing a little bit of research in preparation for our conversation, just so I could kind of sound like I knew what I was talking about.
Okay.
But there are a couple of sightings in my hometown, St. Albans, West Virginia, less than a mile from where my house was. So when I was 2 years old, whatever I was doing as a 2-year-old, a couple of folks supposedly saw something that resembled what was being seen around the Point Pleasant area.
Mm-hmm.
So I found I actually sent a text out to my siblings and said, "Hey, anybody, you remember this?" Because I'm the youngest of the family, and I didn't get it. No one responded, so I'm assuming that means no.
They're like, we're not talking about that.
Yeah, that's Robin is cryptid stuff again.
That's interesting because there was a lot of sightings of the Mothman in that time period, right? So there's a whole book called The Mothman Prophecies that talks about John Keel, that talks about all the sightings, and not only that, but the other weirdness that happened during that time period and afterwards as well.
Yep.
But go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob. I was going to say that's something that sort of I did not realize until a couple of days ago that there is actually Men in Black, quote unquote, sightings around that time as well. And
some of the first Men in Black sightings, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think they coined the term, but I think that that was, for popular culture, it was some of the more, most popular, but the more known sightings of Men in Black. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And I actually, some of the other, you can tell me whether they're interesting or not, but Point Pleasant was actually not the first place that they suspect the sighting was. There were five guys digging a grave in a town called Clendenin, which is actually closer to St. Albans than Point Pleasant, that supposedly saw a brown winged humanoid take flight from a tree by where they were digging.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a day or two before the big the one that's on the Mothman specials about the 2 couples in the car that first sighted it.
Yeah, they drove really fast back into town from the TNT area. Yeah,
exactly. The ex-munitions storage place.
Yeah, well, when I went to visit, I went there. I went to the TNT area, and I went into the bunkers. We walked through the TNT area and looked at several of the bunkers, and also found the old power plant location, which is not there anymore.
Okay.
But did go see where it was as well. And the road that obviously has changed over time, but the road that leads back into town from there where the folks had their encounter. It really is interesting. And one of the things that, the naysayers, if you will, Well, it was a sandhill crane, right? And when you're in the TNT area now, it's a nature preserve, right? And there are cranes there, and you'll see them if you go wandering around in that area. But they're not. I mean, they're big for birds.
Yeah.
But they're not humanoid big.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Now, but I will tell you though, and this has nothing to do with my time there. So here, my house, I live out in the country a bit, and we have cranes. We have a lake and that's nearby, and cranes. And when they go overhead during the day, they cast a very large shadow, and it kind of freaks you out every once in a while.
Isn't it weird how that sort of, what I assume to be some instinctual feeling passes over you, where like a quick shadow passes and peripherally, and you kind of get this heebie-jeebie?
Yeah, because they are a large bird with, I think it's like 6 foot wingspan some of them can have, and so forth. And when it passes over and the sun's shining, I mean, it is a huge shadow on the ground, and it's very noticeable. And I several times I've been outside, doing yard work or whatever the hell I'm doing, and they go overhead, and it's like, what the hell was that? Because it's so different than anything else. There's hawks, don't have that big a shadow, regular birds, but when those go over, they do cast a really large shadow. But that doesn't make sense to the story of it being a humanoid, let alone being at night.
Right.
A lot of
and from my limited research, it seemed like most of the sightings, the first thing that they notice is something on the ground that then takes flight, as opposed to something that's passing overhead.
Right. And sandhill cranes don't have, their legs are like sticks. You know what I mean? They don't have any substantive leg muscles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you wouldn't look at a sandhill crane and think that's a guy.
You've never seen my legs, Bob, so you never know. I've got thin legs.
Well, let's not get into that. But I mean, typically speaking, they're not very thick, and so it's not overly humanoid looking. It's obviously, something else, a bird of some kind or something. But that's fascinating. And so, but you said you lived there until you were like 15 or whatever.
13, yeah.
13. And so, I mean, was this something in the lore of the area?
I was trying to think back to when I first heard. I was very much aware of the term the Mothman, but I don't know necessarily where I first picked that up. I know my mom was a big sort of sci-fi reader when I was growing up. We had a collection of all these books, and there were some, cryptid type titles there as well. So it's possible that maybe I picked something out of the library and the bookcase where she kept all this stuff and sort of familiarized myself with it. Or maybe I picked up something that was on, one of those half-hour shows that used to be on when I was younger, did a special on Mothman. In Search of, maybe there was an In Search of episode, but I was aware of it. I was aware it was Point Pleasant related, but I think when I was in West Virginia, it wasn't top of mind for me there. I never actually even put two and two together. It was, I think, after I had left to move to Chicago that I really said, oh my gosh, that was actually in my home state.
Yeah, you were just mining coal and trying to make a living.
Exactly. Right. They put me out in the mine when I was 2.5. So
that's right. Hey, he's walking. Time to go to work.
Give him the pickaxe and send him underground.
But that's interesting. I just, because to me it's interesting. So the reason I went there was my son was interested, and I'm interested as well. I don't want to put it upon him like, oh, I went because he wanted to go. I wanted to go as well. We were both interested in these kind of phenomena, and he was at an age like in his teens, like 13, 14, and he said, he would like to go there. I said, well, let's just go. Right. So we went on a little long weekend thing to see it. And Point Pleasant really embraced the Mothman. And I find that fascinating because, Point Pleasant's not a happening town. It's not got like a lot of industry or anything. And so the Mothman aspect of things really is an industry now there.
Yep.
and they've embraced it, and they have a statue, and there's a museum which we went to and everything, and they have a festival each year and all this kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of plaques about the Mothman in relation to the town and the things that happened. Whereas we went to, there's a place called Van Meter, Iowa, which is another flying cryptid, and it was called the Van Meter Visitor. And we went to Van Meter, Iowa on another trip, a long weekend trip, to go see where the Van Meter Visitor was. And they didn't even want to talk about it. I mean, we literally talked to people. I asked people in the town while we were there, because we were looking for specific, there was a brickyard is where it was seen at originally. And we wanted to find the brickyard. And I asked some people, we went to City Hall and asked about it, because they had a little museum for like a local baseball player who made it big in the big leagues at some point in time. And they were open, so I went in there and we went to the baseball thing. And then I said, hey, you know about that Van Meter Visitor? And they're like, no. And and we went to the library. It was almost as if they purposefully were denying everything. It was the weirdest trip that we've been on, and it was really creepy, because we went into like a gas station thing, same thing. Visitor, I don't know what you're talking about. Yet they are known for this thing, and it was the turn of the century, and it was cited by all the people in town, and they shot at it. So like the town, the mayor and the doctor and all these, uppity people in town chased this thing to the brickyard area, and it went down in a shaft, because they were mining clay, and it disappeared down the shaft. And so we ended up, the town's not very big, but we drove all over town, and we did find where the brickyard used to be. And don't tell anybody, but I have a piece of brick from the Van Meter Visitor area. Impressive. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that is kind of strange. It's like they either don't want they don't want folks like you coming in and asking about it because they don't care. But
afterwards, I found out they have a festival.
Okay, that's interesting.
But that's the weird, and I don't know if it's somebody from outside that does the festival or something, and this brings it to town. But back to Point Pleasant and the Mothman, they love it. And I find that fascinating.
I think Van Meter might have a marketing problem or a branding problem. Maybe if they had a cooler, like a better name than the Van Meter Visitor, they might get them a little more attractive.
Well, you should look it up if you like this kind of stuff. The Van Meter Visitor is a fascinating story. It's not like the Mothman where it has multiple sightings. The Visitor happened, I think, across 3 nights at the turn of the century. But everybody in town knew about it, and they were trying to kill it. And it was a big thing at that point in time. And then it went down the hole and then never was seen again. So, but the Mothman has been seen multiple times, but his most, why don't you tell us, what was his most famous thing?
So the story that gets the most attention is a couple of couples. This is the part that's always puzzled me. It's almost midnight on a night, and there's a couple of couples driving around near the old munitions plant. So I don't know why they were there at that time of night.
They were getting it on. Come on, Rob. That's what
I guess. I mean, they're already married. As far as I do,
they needed to get out in the open air. I don't know.
I guess maybe they needed some air, needed to get away from the kids, and decided to go out together.
There was a lot more drinking and driving back in those days.
Right.
Yeah, everybody
no seatbelts.
Beat it out. Yeah, no seatbelts. A lot of drinking, a lot of driving.
Yep.
Nowadays, that's also frowned upon. Back then, I mean, it was major points if you were out drinking and driving. Oh, you're cool.
So they're out there practicing their drinking and driving skills, maybe when the roads are a little more clear.
Fooling around.
So anyway, they're driving down this road, and I guess the headlights show on what they have described as a 6 to 7 foot humanoid form. And depending on, I actually read the police reports because I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive, but they talk about how they believe the headlights sort of illuminated the eyes, which had a bit of a reddish glow to them when the headlights hit it. But they said that it appeared to have these large wings folded on its back. It was a grayish color. And as soon as the headlights hit it, they saw it run into, I believe, one of the buildings. And obviously, Bob, you have some knowledge here too, so correct me because I've been.
I think the power station, I think, or one of the buildings near the power station. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess they decided that. Did they pursue it into the building, or did they just turn around and start going the other direction?
I think they did, and because the power station was crumbling at that point. Because this is, even at this point when all this happened, it was an abandoned. It was one of the many places in the United States during World War II where they made munitions, and had all of the accoutrement that you would need for a military site. Right. So it generated its own power, had all its barracks and everything, but they left it. They just, at the end of the war, all this stuff gets abandoned. And so it was very much in disrepair, I think at that time. And so like parts of the building were collapsing and so forth, my understanding.
And so
they chased him in there though, and put the light on him, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point they determined this was a bad idea, and they started trying to run away in their car. And then apparently the creature started pacing them, and they said they were getting close to 100 miles per hour in their car, and this thing was quote unquote gliding above them as they were traveling along the road. So it freaked them out enough where they actually went and both of the couples filed police reports with the Point Pleasant Police Department. Which seems to be, especially if they're out drinking and driving, that doesn't sound like a real good idea, unless they actually did experience something.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is, they did, and I think the police even did a cursory, drive out to check out things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of the officers that speculated that maybe it was a sandhill crane or something that might have caused it, But yeah, they did go out based on the reports to go see what might be going on there.
Yeah, but you have, like you said, 4 people who witnessed this and then were chased, and obviously scared. My understanding, I think, if I recall, when they went into the power plant, they had a flashlight and they shined it up. It was like a multi-story opening, and it was like perched up on a beam. And that's when they totally flipped out and took off running, because this thing was up high, right? There's no stairs, right?
Right.
It had got up on this beam, and it was rather large and kind of menacing above them, and they flipped out and took off. So, yeah, but the, people have sightings, Bigfoot or any other cryptid, you want to say, Loch Ness Monster, Champ in New York. But you have so many of them. Everybody, puts them down. They say, oh, it could be this, it could be that. Everybody can't be wrong, can they? That's what I always think.
Yeah, to me, it feels like only one has to be right, and it could still be a possibility, right? So even if 99 of them are making it up or just trying to sort of go with the flow and make up their own story to get a little bit of attention, I can't see a lot of motives for these folks to do what they did.
Right. So this isn't the age of that. So this is
right.
There's no Haktui phenomenon that's happening back then, where it's like, hey, you go out and see something crazy and tell everybody you're going to be popular, you're going to get paid to go to drink at bars. None of that happened back then. It basically just becomes a cool story that you could tell your friends or not, depending on how you're portrayed, as a loony or something. So I always think, to me, the funny thing about all these tales is, I think, pre-90s, right? So pre-internet, so pre-95, 97, those have to be more credible, because there's nowhere for you to go. You know what I mean with it?
Right.
There, once the internet happened, there's an outlet for everyone, like we're doing right now. And but pre-internet, what's your outlet? You're going to make a zine about it? You know what I mean? I mean, what's I suppose you could, but
you could.
But there's the outlets are much smaller, and so then the reason to do it becomes smaller. You have to be really dedicated person to want to do something at that level.
Yes, the motivation is to not be truthful. The motivation is to not be truthful back then were substantially fewer than what the benefits one might get today should they choose to try to spread some story that may or may not be true.
Yeah, exactly. It seems to be there. I don't know that it adds to their credibility necessarily, but it certainly adds to the reasoning why it might not be false.
Yes,
it probably is true. And I find
and that's one of the things when we were talking last time that it cracks me up when folks claim something doesn't exist because there's no current proof that it does.
Right. There's no body or bones. That means it doesn't. Yeah. I didn't see my grandfather's bones, but I know he died.
Well, I mean, and then every advancement in science from that point, these would have been theoretical to say, well, no, the Earth is definitely flat, right? Until
well, we have plans a long time ago.
Right. So it doesn't really. I mean, I understand what they're saying. That is the fact. When I did text my siblings about, hey, do you guys remember this? And my one brother, who's very analytical, just said it's interesting in how these sightings have gone down since people got cell phones or something like that. Like he's one of the folks that think, well, obviously by now there'd be a picture because everyone's carrying a camera in their pocket essentially.
But there is the Chicago sightings; they have pictures.
Right. Yeah. More so than they did in West Virginia. Yes.
Yeah. And see, I don't think that's true because I still have yet to get a picture of a good accident, and they happen constantly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's probably one of the unless you're literally going out looking to experience, and that's not what a lot of the witnesses are doing, right? People do go Bigfoot hunting, as you know, and they're out, they've got their cameras and they're ready to go. But if you're out there doing something else and suddenly you run across a Mothman, for example, the last thing you're probably going to think of in that instance, I can't wait to get a picture of this. My friends aren't going to believe this, so I better take a snapshot.
Yeah, well, and I don't know, I touched upon it, the drone, like tonight, a drone flew over my house and I didn't get a picture of it, but I can tell you a drone flew over my house. I saw it and I told my son, hey, look out the window. You can see a drone coming over the house. And he saw it too. But I didn't get a picture because I was watching the movie and, and looked out the window and happened to see this thing coming off over the trees. So, everybody is not, even though we all have phones in our pockets, we're not all, trigger happy taking pictures constantly,
Right. And I'm mostly just trying to unlock the damn thing half the time, even when in the morning when I'm walking the dog, I'm trying to use the flashlight so I can pick up her business and it's falling out of my hand. So yeah, I couldn't even imagine getting a picture of Mothman should he determine to show himself.
I always make fun of my wife because she's so slow to take a picture. We have cats and she's always taking pictures of the cats. And then she gets mad because they stop doing the cute thing by the time she gets her camera app going. And I always laugh. I'm like, you really got to practice or something. You're so slow. You're never going to get a picture of these cats doing what you want. So
my personal favorite is when you think you're taking a video and you go back to look at it and you get a blurry still because you pressed the wrong button initially.
That's funny. Yeah. But the other thing, back to the Mothman, the other big thing is the Silver Bridge collapse.
Yeah.
And that is what I think a lot of people know, how they know Mothman is because it's a harbinger of doom.
Right. That's some people are connecting the two. I'm not sure I buy into that theory, but yes, it happened soon after the sightings. And then the Richard Gere movie that came out, apparently that was the climax of the film. So it kind of tied the two together, at least in the folks' minds.
Right. Yeah. The the morbid thing to me when I visited Point Pleasant was they have a flood wall that is up, around the town because of the river there, the Ohio River.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And on the flood wall, where the entrance to the Silver Bridge used to be, is a mural of the Silver Bridge. Like if you were like going into the distance, but it's on the wall, right? And I thought that was kind of morbid. Because
it was painted after effect in tribute to the bridge.
Yeah, it's a tribute to the Silver, and there's a plaque there. It says this was the entrance to the Silver Bridge that takes you from West Virginia to Ohio. And and they have like 60s era cars like going into the, like it's like Wile E. Coyote kind of situation. And I thought, is this poor taste or not? I was confused.
Probably a local artist.
It was local. Yeah, it was very local.
Let them express themselves in the way that they feel.
But I mean, I was like, well, it's interesting to know that it was right here. There's a plaque, but the artwork really drove it home. That
it wasn't
several
of the
people died
carnage,
there.
Right? Yeah. It wasn't the bridge in the water, was it? It was
no. It was as if people were still going over it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And the other unfortunate thing is the other bridges that are there now, not that great. They're not very good bridges. I'll be honest with you. They don't look like they're great bridges. They look like old bridges as well. But they are, because they were built after the disaster in the 60s. So then now they're very old.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah. 60 years plus now, right?
Yeah. You go over two bridges to get from, it's like you bounce off an island or something, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And but the Silver Bridge collapse was on Christmas time. I think it was Christmas Eve. And a lot of traffic going back and forth, and the freezing temperatures, obviously, in that time of year, and supposedly
so December
the Mothman,
15th.
December 15th. So it was Christmas time, and not quite.
Yeah, and it was actually a year later, almost. It was the following year.
So the following year from when the other appearance.
Yeah.
But some people said they saw him on top of the bridge. Now there is a picture of the Mothman on the bridge, but it's a faked picture, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
If you have to encounter that, I think that is a not real. No, nobody actually got a picture of him on the bridge.
Yeah, none of my sources had that. As I was trying to rekindle some of my memories around this, I did not see that picture.
But he was there. I can't remember how far in advance of the collapse, but he was there, I think, hours. I don't think it was like a day or two. I think it was literally hours, supposedly.
Well, and you've heard that he was supposedly seen around Chernobyl and the Twin Towers as well. Now,
correct.
I don't know.
Supposedly, yeah.
Supposedly, yes.
But and is there, so then why don't we believe? We both were very skeptical of that.
Yeah.
Why? Why are we buying into him being in Point Pleasant? Chernobyl, there's no effing way he was in Chernobyl.
I guess I see that as a tenuous connection to sort of. I don't think it's fair to the Mothman, Bob, to associate him as being a harbinger of doom. He's just your. I'm protective of this cryptid in that regard, and so I think it was a bit of a copycat.
Do you have the plushie? Because they do have a plushie Mothman. You can.
I don't, and if I do, I'm not sure which. Because the more I read, I always assumed he was a lot more moth-like, but the more I read, like the eyewitness accounts. Well, they're very humanoid. Like they say, actually a human head, and all the cool looking plushies that I see kind of have the rounded torso with the eyes kind of on the top of the chest.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if I were to get one of those, I wouldn't feel I was being anatomically accurate with most of the descriptions of the Mothman. So bit of a, but no, not that much of a fan. I just don't see that. But you're right, though. I'm sitting there and applying logic to discussing the possibility of a cryptid existing. That's a tenuous connection to him being associated with a precursor of doom, Bob. Everyone can see that. But of course, it could very well be a Mothman there.
But I do think that's funny because, it just jumped into my head as we were talking. It's like, why are we, seem to be so convicted that this happened as opposed to that? And I do agree. I think that, again, those were much later happenings, right? And then and we get into the territory that we just described as being, a little more prone to, placing things there for, some kind of attention, as opposed to these people who were, minding their own business, having a good time one night and being chased by this creature.
Right.
I think it's people trying to perpetuate the myth a little bit is my thought as well. So.
And I'll also submit to you the more recent sightings of a similar creature in the Chicago area that I'm sure.
How old is this Mothman? He's really got to be up there at this point.
Well, and he's been sighted around Chicago, I believe, since 2011-ish.
Yeah, 2011.
And no real. He's not doing it. I'm not sure what he's foretelling in terms of significant disasters, but there's not been much going on there.
Cubs kept losing, and then he left for a couple of years, and then they won. So
maybe that's what he went to Chernobyl. I don't.
Yeah, the Bears didn't do so well either during his tenure there. So,
although they did win the Super Bowl when I was a Bears fan, so that was
back in the 80s. Yeah. But there was no Mothman there then. So.
No, there was not. No, in fact, I missed him. I moved in the late 90s, and he didn't show up until the early 2000s.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, again, so this one in Chicago, if we move from West Virginia to Chicago, totally different setting, right? So West Virginia, very, very rural, right? And I mean, it's a city, not in the sense of San Fran, which I won't say that, San Francisco. But Chicago is a big, big, big city.
Yeah.
And it's not, if everybody applies their prejudices accordingly, in West Virginia, they see the Mothman because they're a bunch of, backwoods people. In Chicago, they're cultured. They're not going to see the Mothman.
Right.
I mean, that's what people generally think. But here we go, and we have, fairly I mean, I've seen pictures of this that are, not supposedly not faked pictures, doctored pictures that are real pictures, and at least no one has purposefully manipulated them, and it's in the city.
Yeah, there's actually a Mothman sightings map. And I guess there's over 300 reports, and there's a couple of guys who I guess are collecting and plotting these out on maps. They consider they have 170 credible accounts since they started in 2011 of folks who have reported seeing a creature like that.
But that's interesting to me because I mean, much different. You would in that area in West Virginia. I mean, the population density is so much lower.
Right.
So the chances of seeing something are so much lower. Where in Chicago, I mean, the population density is so much higher that, there's people out 24 hours a day doing something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where in Point Pleasant, everybody probably goes to bed. These people who are out driving around drinking at midnight or whatever were not the norm. They were the, they were the minority at that point in time. So it's interesting that would happen. And the fact that in Chicago, there's big buildings and everything. And so, this thing is not flying at 10,000 feet. And so, it's flying at the height of buildings.
And also a handful of sightings around O'Hare Airport as well.
Yeah. Point Pleasant, I think 4 stories. I don't remember seeing anything more than 4 or 5 stories, honestly. Well, they had a nuclear power plant outside of town. That was taller. But that was not close to. That was outside of town. So
okay,
that's taller than 5 stories. But yeah, it's a totally different thing. And so I suppose I think Mothman is a great name because of alliteration, Mothman, but it's a poor name as a descriptor. And now they're applying it to any flying humanoid is a Mothman.
Right.
Because, I don't know that the Chicago one, I don't think anybody's had a super, super close encounter with it. And to describe it the way that they did in West Virginia, in Point Pleasant.
I'm trying to think back, because the sightings that I looked into a little bit are they blur a little bit between the different ones that I asked. I've been doing a bit of a summary, and I'm using artificial intelligence, Bob. We've had a conversation about that as well, to help me sort of streamline all these sources and help me distill down some of the information. And
Man,
I asked for kind
you're
of
prepared.
Yeah, I will. It's
I didn't even write down. I wrote down in my head Bigfoot. So there you go.
Well, we still can't trust the stuff because they tend to hallucinate as well. So using AI to compile information about cryptid sightings is probably not the most credible way of fact checking oneself. But I think they reported in some instances like red eyes as well in some of the Chicago sightings. The overall sort of characteristics that sort of span the majority of the sightings, both in West Virginia and Chicago, were tall, 6 to 7 feet, humanoid, dark gray or dark in color, and then red eyes almost all the time. So those are kind of the things that float to the descriptions
are somewhat similar. Now let me ask you this though. Let me ask you this. So we're calling it a cryptid. We think, so far we've been talking as an animal of some kind, right? Mothman. Alien. What do you think? It's an alien. It's like the Hawkman from, Hawkman comic books, or from Flash Gordon, the Hawkman. Could it just be a Hawkman kind of alien that's just visiting? And he's like, hey, I'd love to see what's going on in downtown Chicago.
And this is where I need to start poking around on these. Like I said, when you say alien, do you mean not of the Earth? Or do you mean not of this dimension?
Either one. People totally alien to our area. Yeah.
I guess I have a hard time thinking that it's especially because of the urban setting of Chicago, that it's just some sort of a human creature that's taken up roost in some of the buildings and the Chicago skyline, right? So I've not really thought this through, and I tend to be pretty logical sometimes. I'm going to go with something that's probably not like the standard animal. Like, it's not a wayward flying humanoid that just happens to be able to live in Chicago. It's either coming in from some of the more wooded areas of the city or suburbs and likes the, I guess, that kind of, you talk about the name not being apt in all ways, but if it's attracted to the lights of the skyline, maybe there are some moth tendencies of it flying toward the Chicago skyline.
Yeah.
To see some of the lights of the buildings. But
I think, to me, though, it is just as likely that it could be some other type of life form from interdimensional or otherwise that is just taking in the sights. I mean, some people like to go camping and some people like to go to the city, and there you go. I mean, and when you travel, you may do both. And then also that would explain the span of time and the different locations, is if it's like more of a species as opposed to an individual. That was always the thing. I mentioned Bigfoot. That's always the thing with Bigfoot, is there's a certain group of folks who think it's just one. It is a Bigfoot, right? And I'm like, there's nothing that's just one. Typically, it's very, very rare to have a one of something. And so that's why I think the Mothman whether it's an animal or something else, there's not one Mothman. There's multiple.
Well, and here's a bit of tie a couple of loose thread theories together. There are some who feel that what we perceive as extraterrestrials or aliens are actually folks that have figured out time travel in the future. Mm-hmm. Maybe the Mothman, the flying humanoid, is simply a way in which someone who has the ability to time travel is able to sort of survey areas less detected and more efficiently than walking on foot. So, maybe this is a future as a time traveler versus otherworldly or other dimensional alien coming back to sort of survey things in a relatively streamlined and efficient way of getting around.
Yeah,
as the moth
or
flies
maybe they are alien snowboarders. You know what I mean? There's a special breed of person. Yeah. It's like, dude, I love to fly around. I'm gonna get my,
Or they've paid a certain amount of money to be able to visit Earth for a little bit. Here, put this suit on. Make sure you got your red eyes in the right place so you can your night vision eye.
Let me put on a new battery on you so your eyes are red enough. But I think that is something that, with Mothman at least, you don't hear very much about. You don't hear interdimensional being, alien associated with Mothman. Nowadays with Bigfoot, you hear interdimensional being associated with Bigfoot, like within the last 5-10 years. Yeah. Mothman, at least from what I've read and so forth, no one's ever really talked about it being an interdimensional being or anything yet. If you read John Keel's book, there were beings that were human but not human that showed up in Point Pleasant after the Mothman was sighted. And I'm talking about Ingrid Cold.
Right.
And or Indrid Cold.
Indrid, I believe, yeah.
Indrid, yeah, and the Men in Black, who seem to be very pale and robotic in nature. And so, again, interesting that those things appear, but when people mostly talk about the Mothman, they don't draw the connection as much.
Right.
Like it's a loose pet. Well, Indrid Cole is like, hey, I lost my Mothman. Anybody seen it?
Yeah, that's true. And there's also the UFO sighting. So I would think, as opposed to interdimensional, if anything, they're thinking about otherworldly to some extent, but from a spaceship of sorts. But yeah, I hear you. And there's definitely a more recent, at least and I agree with you in terms of a lot of the Bigfoot accounts, there's that possibility that people are expressing, not the ones that are scientific about it, right? But if we back up a little bit, I would think given the information that I've heard, again, all secondhand through podcasts such as this, much more likely that Bigfoot would be a biological creature than Mothman, in my limited view and opinion. But
we haven't even mentioned Mothman maybe is a robot or something.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, of course. 100 miles per hour, gliding. Why not?
Yeah, could be robotic in some nature.
Well, and to support what you just said there, one of the earlier witnesses around Point Pleasant, it supposedly swooped down and looked at her through the windshield of her car, and she had to go to the hospital to have treatment on some sort of extreme light injury. It's the same kind of injury that happens to one's eyes when they see some really bright light or some intense light.
That's what happened. Arc welding or something. You can
something like
burn
that,
your corneas. Yeah.
And apparently, I was reading some of the summaries of what Keel had said in his book, and it sounds like maybe you're more knowledgeable of that than I am, because I've only done some cursory poking around. But apparently, that a lot of times when folks have UFO sightings, they sometimes have that same instance as well. So in this instance, with the woman who saw the Mothman, she had the same sort of issue with her eyes. And so that sort of plays into your concept of maybe it's a more machine than animal or being.
Yeah, that's it. But you would think at this point we would have a better idea. But maybe
well,
not.
now let's get back to the first thing we talked about. That what drone? Maybe it's futuristic drone. That's what Mothman is.
In the 60s, that would have been futuristic for sure.
Interdimensional drone that they're sending through in the
interdimensional drone. I had an interdimensional drone go over my house just a few minutes ago, or an hour ago now. But
you should file a police report.
Yeah, no kidding. Interesting. I don't know, but there's so many possibilities. But I guess so now, right? So the Mothman in the 60s, none of this was happening. Now you're talking in the 2011s onward, because it's happened more than once. There's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
There's cameras, there's weather cameras on top of tall buildings in Chicago to look out at the weather that you can go. WeatherBug, I think, is one of the networks. None of them have caught the Mothman, I guess.
Or they had, and they decided not to show.
Well, that's what bothers me, is that we have all this technology. It's been deployed, right? And we still have problems. There's still so many holes in the coverage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things that AI could solve easily. If you said, I want an AI that just watches all of the cameras that are publicly accessible in Chicago to get me a picture of this goddamn Mothman.
Yeah.
There's no reason. There's no reason why it can't happen. The technology exists currently to do that.
Yeah, what you're saying is accurate, because when you're talking about people who put out the trail cams to try to catch pictures of Sasquatch, and they talk about the number of hours that they have to watch in many instances, and the ability to sort of distill that down to something where they could just look at every frame. But AI could do that overnight if you were to actually set it up appropriately.
Yeah, I don't understand. I guess, well, there's always money, but so basically economics is ruining all our fun. Basically, we can't actually catch this thing because it's economically not feasible.
Well, you could dance into the whole conspiracy theory side of things and talk about that. There is information out there, and the folks who sort of have a chokehold or a throttle, at least, on what makes it out into the general public. It's the reason the Men in Black show up or theoretically take away the Bigfoot you ran over accidentally one night while driving home, and when you go back the next morning to pick it up, it's gone.
Yeah. Got cleaned up. Yeah.
Got cleaned up somehow. The big black SUVs with the tinted windows, right?
Right. Well, and now with satellite imagery, right? They can read a license plate from space. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Mothman's bigger than a license plate.
It is true. I don't think he has a license plate, though.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Why don't we have a picture of the Mothman butt flying through the air? Because you can zoom in that far.
And maybe we do. Maybe Biden. maybe they're sitting around every day in the Oval Office and they scan all the Mothman shots they've got.
I got a new briefing for you on the Mothman, sir.
He's
Not
got
another one. Well, Rob, this has been fascinating, don't you think?
It's been fun.
We've gone down so many avenues here.
Yep.
Now I hope maybe you'll get to go back to your little town in West Virginia and stop by the Mothman museum or something sometime.
Yeah,
soon.
I would love to drag my family back there and make them see where I grew up, and definitely stop by Point Pleasant.
Yeah. Now, just as an aside, there's another one called the Flatwoods Monster that's actually close to there as well.
Okay. I've heard the name. I don't recall the story.
Yeah. And it's totally doesn't look anything like the Mothman.
Okay.
You look up Flatwoods Monster. It's in a little town. It happened in a little town, and everybody, again, in the past, and the poor people who saw it were ridiculed and so forth. And but they saw what could have been a robot, could have been an alien, looked really, really weird, and scared the bejesus out of them and their kids in the woods. So, yeah.
And a much better name than the Van Meter Visitor. The Flatwoods
You think?
Monster.
I love Van Meter Visitor.
You do?
Yes, I think it's the greatest.
I mean, a visitor could be just somebody coming in from a different town, right? That's not.
Yeah.
Monster.
I thought it would be great for their local team, the local high school team, to be called the Visitors. So then they're always the visitor. It's visitors versus the visitors, or there's no home team. It's always the Visitors. I thought that would be great. And
that's a good idea.
I don't think they're going to go for it, though. They seem to be very resistant to the Visitor.
Maybe you need to,
Need to be Van Meter is not too far from the capital, of Iowa.
Okay.
So you should go. You should go there too, but that's not really a destination for you. There's nothing else to take you there.
Putting pins in my map of the U.S. right now.
Yeah, Flatwoods Monster, Van Meter Visitor, Mothman. I mean, it goes on and on. Champ. Have you ever been to?
You mentioned Champ in New York.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Lake Champlain. Right. It's on Vermont, New York. I've been there too.
So you've been making the rounds. You've got a definite interest.
That one wasn't on purpose. Well, it was on purpose. We were on vacation in Vermont and went to Lake Champlain and had lunch on the lake, and have the Champ stuff there and so forth. But I didn't intentionally go there to see Champ like I did to go see the Mothman. So
right. Is there a Champ statue?
Yeah, they have a Champ statue, and you can buy trinkets, tchotchkes.
Van Meter Visitor?
No, there's none of that. No tchotchkes. I have a brick, but other than that, that's all I've got.
the non-sanctioned brick from Van Meter.
I took it from the easement, so I didn't encroach upon the property.
Okay.
Yeah, because the bricks were everywhere. I mean, literally, they were all over the ground.
The aptly named brickyard,
pieces of bricks. Yeah, it was a brickyard, so all kinds of bricks fell off, and they were all over the ground. So, yeah, it's fascinating. It's very fascinating. But Rob, so people can find you at Your Most Interesting Story podcast, and I've got the YouTube thing up there on the screen.
And if you have a Mothman encounter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you had a Mothman encounter, I'm sure you'd want to talk to him.
Absolutely. We definitely want to get to the bottom of this, right?
Other things. Yeah. That'd be fascinating. And you're going to take on your new career as a cryptid hunter.
Yeah, sure. And why not? Yep. Move from podcasting down to hunting cryptids, or maybe you do a combo.
Yeah. You could talk about it while you're out in the field.
There we go.
It may be a lot of hours of nothing, but one time, all you need is one thing to hit and it'll take off. I swear.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You'll be the one to get the picture.
I'm here in Point Pleasant. I'm out in the TNT waiting for the Mothman.
I could be writing my songs while I'm doing it too.
Yeah, true. Well, I mean, there's a lot of material in all this. So
yeah.
But it's been fantastic talking to you, Rob. I appreciate you coming on to talk about this topic with me and have this conversation.
Of course, Bob. It's been a blast. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Your Most Interesting Podcast on YouTube. Everywhere you want to go. It's on Spotify. It's on. There's so many now. I found a new thing called listen.to. You're probably on there as well.
So, I might be.
Yeah.
I'm about a platform that distributes them to all the major podcatchers. So if it's ramping up, it's more than likely on that as well.
There you go. Check it out. Till next time, folks. Hold on.